Superhero comics and movies tend to have very similar tropes, and they're filled with instances of superhero logic that leave you either scratching your head or facepalming. I know, you could pretty much nitpick anything in comics and say, oh, that doesn't make sense. But there are some moments of Marvel superhero logic that we need to talk about. Of course, I don't expect comics or superhero movies to ever be realistic, but when all laws of science and time are broken, eagle-eyed fans take notice. I'm looking at you, Captain America, and AntMan, and yeah, you know what? Let's just get into it, huh? Typically, the number one thing about being a superhero is that you're incredibly powerful. Now, of course, not all superheroes fit the bill, but in general, superheroes are strong. The thing is, sometimes they can be a little too strong. Case in point, the Incredible Hulk. In Ang Lee's Hulk, he picks up a tank by its turret and throws it about a kilometer. If he grabbed the tank from the bottom, sure, whatever, but by the turret should have detached immediately under those kinds of forces. In another insane feat of strength, the Hulk saved his teammates in Secret Wars by catching a mountain range weighing 150 billion tons. To put this into perspective, have you ever tried balancing a water balloon the size of a swimming pool on the head of a pin? Yeah, it's impossible, and so is lifting 150 billion tons. Speaking of strength, don't even get us started on when a superhero or supervillain gets punched so hard they fly through buildings, cars, and trees. If a punch was that strong, it would simply go right through the recipient of the punch's body, like Sandman. That's gotta hurt. But enough about the strength of superheroes, let's talk about how our favorite heroes become that strong to begin with. Usually, something happens that turns a regular person into an ultra-powerful being, and one of the most popular ways this is done is through radiation. You know, one of the most dangerous things a human could be exposed to? Yeah, that. The Hulk was the result of Bruce Banner's exposure to high levels of gamma radiation. Now, I'm no scientist, but if you were exposed to that much gamma radiation, wouldn't you turn to dust, or at least have severe radiation poisoning? Of course you would, but not in the alternate universe that is Earth 616. SpiderMan got bit by a radioactive spider, which isn't as severe, but you'd still have radiation poisoning from the bite, not superpowers. Nothing good can come from exposing yourself to radiation, so I don't recommend going to your nearest nuclear power plant and taking a swim. Sure, you might become a mutant, but not the X-Men kind of mutant, the scientific meaning of mutant, and nobody wants that. Wakanda is one of the coolest places in the Marvel Universe. It's one of the most advanced countries in the world, full of vibranium, and also hidden from the rest of the world, so no one knows about its secret. But how does a super advanced society find a way to hide itself in a world where almost every inch of it has been walked on? Science, of course. Vibranium can do pretty much anything the people of Wakanda want it to do, like creating an illusion to make it seem like Wakanda is just a boring agrarian society with nothing interesting, when behind that cloak, it's one heck of a futuristic society. We'll let the whole illusion thing slide since vibranium is a wild card, but Wakanda would have been found out way earlier in real life. A society like that would be an easy target for colonial powers, and surely Wakanda would have fought back with their advanced weaponry, but that wasn't the case. In the MCU, they stayed hidden until they decided to go public. Everyone loves Captain America. Well, except for the Red Skull and plenty of other villains, but you know what I mean. While Steve Rogers is an incredibly powerful super soldier, he doesn't solely rely on his fist to get the job done. He has his trusty shield that can somehow bounce perfectly off everything and end up right back in his hands. That totally makes sense, right? As much as I love Cap and wish I had the physics-defying shield, it just isn't possible for it to do the things that it does. Sure, if Cap perfectly angles his throws, the shield could come back to him, but as we've seen, it doesn't always hit something before coming back. Even if Captain America had magnets on his wrist to reel his shield back in after every throw, they would have to be huge and incredibly powerful to work. If those gigantic magnets in the junkyard have to get super close to lift a car, then so would Captain America's wrist to that shield. I hope Captain Australia has a boomerang because at least that obeys physics. Everybody also loves the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist Tony Stark, and almost a year later, we're still devastated that he's gone for good in the MCU after Endgame. We've pressed plenty of Fs to pay our respects, but while he was still alive, he had one thing to thank for his survival. No, we're not talking about Pepper Potts, we're talking about his arc reactor. You know, that shiny blue thing in his chest that uses magnets to keep the shrapnel away from his heart. When you think about it, it makes perfect sense. He uses a made-up material to keep himself alive. It happens in comics all the time, folks. But when you actually sit down and think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you put this foreign object full of magnets near some of your body's most important organs? That's just asking for something to go wrong. The arc reactor almost killed Tony in Iron Man 2, and he can just take it off in Iron Man 3 to appease Pepper Potts, so we don't even know if he actually needed it past Iron Man 1. We're just going to get straight to the point here. Only comic book science can explain the physics behind Pym particles and the Ant-Man suit. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I won't get deep into the laws of physics here, but there are two things you need to know about: the square-cube law and the conservation of mass. Essentially, the square-cube law states that mass increasing so much more in relation to surface area, so the body isn't able to support itself when Ant-Man changes size. The conservation of mass is much simpler. Mass has to come from somewhere and go somewhere. It can't just disappear. Honestly, we're a bit confused ourselves, but essentially, it's not possible for Ant-Man to do these things because of science. The Pym particles are an easy way around all of this science mumbo-jumbo that may or may not have given us a headache. I already got into how Spider-Man got his powers, but now we're going to talk about two of his favorite gadgets, the iconic web shooters. Peter Parker is one smart cookie, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he could craft the web shooters. The concern here really isn't about the web shooters themselves, but rather what shot out of those web shooters. Where exactly does the material come from? We know the webbing isn't coming out of Peter's behind, like an actual spider, or at least I hope not, cause super gross. So where is this webbing coming from? Sure, he's got web cartridge refills, but does Spider-Man carry so much of them that he can swing around New York City for hours and hours at a time? Many depictions of Spidey show his webbing to be thick rather than fine, so he certainly doesn't use it sparingly. So how does he have so much? I don't think we'll ever get an explanation, but I just had to get it off our chest. Seriously though, I hope it's not coming out of his butt. One of the most punishing things for the human body to deal with is any kind of rapid acceleration or deceleration. Just think about it. When Spider-Man caught Gwen Stacy in the air to try to save her life in the comics, what caused her neck to snap? The instantaneous deceleration of the body. The speed you're falling at increases over time until something stops your momentum. That's a very strong impact that no one will survive. So while it's visually appealing to see characters like Quicksilver save panicking students when the Xavier Institute is exploding, his violent grabbing and brutal acceleration of their bodies would have crushed them in an instant. Touching somebody in any way at that speed would be a death sentence due to the thousands of G-forces. There's a reason why F1 drivers lose nearly 10 pounds after a race, and that reason is G-forces. This also applies to Iron Man. Tony Stark is just a regular guy after all, so when he gets pummeled and tossed around like a ragdoll at super speeds, his brain would pretty much turn to mush. Time travel is absolutely the most complicated idea out there. Take everything you learned from Back to the Future and throw it out the window, because nothing in the MCU works like that. Take War Machine's kill baby Thanos theory as an example. If our heroes went back in time to kill Thanos as a baby, that should change the future, creating what's known as the butterfly effect, but not in the MCU. Killing baby Thanos wouldn't change the current timeline. It would simply create a bunch of alternate timelines from that moment on. As Hulk said in Endgame, if you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, and your former present becomes the past, which now can't be changed by your new future. Yeah, it's definitely complicated, and it doesn't get much simpler in the comics. Kang the Conqueror is known for his crazy time travel shenanigans, and we could probably make a 20-minute video solely on the crazy things he's done. That being said, time travel allows for so many more stories to play out, hey, so we're all for it. Last but certainly not least, we have to talk about superhero costumes. Some of them are just so impractical. Well, they're not too bad in the MCU, but they definitely are in the comics. We often see the classic underwear over the tights look, but that was honestly more of a DC Comics thing than anything. With Marvel, it was all about capes. Thor, Doctor Strange, Vision, Adam Warlock. These are just some of the most well-known caped characters in Marvel, and I just don't get it. These capes would be ripped to shreds under normal conditions due to air resistance, and would outright disintegrate at higher speeds. Plus, they probably get caught in doors, escalators, bike wheels, and so much more. So it definitely doesn't help with maneuverability. Also, have you seen some of the laughably minimal female superhero costumes? Scarlet Witch, Elektra, Emma Frost, and Tigra are just some of the women who have the most impractical costumes of all time. Sure, skin is nice to look at, but not everyone who reads comics is that thirsty, Marvel. Going into battle in a bikini isn't much protection. It would be a bit of distraction, however. And those are just some of the instances where Marvel's superhero logic just doesn't make sense. Everything seems to defy physics, and time travel makes everything super duper complicated. Anyway, what was your favorite superhero logic moment? Is there anything we may have missed? Let us know in the comments section down below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more Marvel videos. Thanks for watching.